And so there's already tons of bacteria in the environment. And so using what's already there and just adding nutrients to the ground would be a way to help them grow, because they tend to live in this like stasis until they get enough food thrown into the system, and then bam, they kind of explode.
I know, but with like E. coli in the stomach, and if when you go to Mexico, you find out that you had them before, you just kind of tip the scales a little bit too hard, and now you're firing out both ends. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another episode today after some technical difficulties. We've got Ph.D. Dr. Janice Kenney. How you doing, Doctor?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you because you are an environmental geochemist, which is an interesting mix of things. But you're basically helping remediate kind of industrial waste and different kind of pollutants with microbiology. Is that right?
Exactly. Microbes and minerals, basically.
Ooh, and we need that right now more than ever, considering how much waste is out there. So I'll start off. Remediation of various forms of pollution seems to be pretty important. So what led you on this journey? Did you take a look around and say, hey, somebody's got to clean some of this stuff up, or did you just fall backwards into it?
More or less. One of the looking around processes. We used to have this little cottage in the lake my parents had. We used to go fishing all the time with my dad. As kids, we would go, catching frogs and catching snakes and stuff, my little sister and I. And I remember seeing little bits of shiny stuff in the lake one day near where the frogs were. And my dad said, oh, that's oil in the lake. Some boat must have had a leak. And it just, I was young, and I just remember being angry. Like, why is there oil surrounding the habitat where these frogs are living? And so that kind of it pissed me off when I was young. And that that kind of anger, in a way, led me onto environmental problems and studying environmental problems in my career. And so I studied earth sciences. I was an undergraduate student, as well as doing chemistry as a minor. So majored in geology and minored in chemistry, and then went on to do a PhD at University of Notre Dame, where I learned about how you could take bacteria and remove heavy metals that were contaminating the environment using those tiny little microorganisms. Small but mighty, you could say those little guys are.
Yeah.
I went to Sweden then afterwards to work on using different spectroscopic tools to figure out better ways to understand how microorganisms or different minerals were interacting with pollutants in the environment. And then did research for a few years and ended up working now at McPherson University is where I'm currently.
Where is that?
Hiding.
Where is that?
McPherson University is in sunny but very cold Edmonton, Alberta.
Ooh, that sounds cold. So have you been progressively more angry, the same amount of anger, or do you think there's hope for some of this stuff that people like us see?
Hopefully it's a productive anger, but it's one of that kind of ebbs and flows depending on what you see people doing or what you see governments doing. But it's become more of a passion than a youthful anger.
Well, you've got some control over the situation, so I guess that helps the psyche say, okay, well, at least I'm got my hands on the wheel to some degree. So
exactly, instead of feeling out of control.
That's how I feel. This is why I started the podcast, so I wouldn't go insane. I say I got to talk to some experts that feel my pain. So there's a plethora of contaminants in the world. There's all kinds of stuff to be worried about. What are some of the ones that you're focusing on and that you've had some success dealing with?
So a few of them have been looking at different types of metals in the environment. So cadmium has been one of the bigger ones that I've studied over the years, as well as actinides, so uranium as an example. I did some work research-wise looking at bacteria and minerals and how they can remove uranium from water. as well as working as a consultant for radioactive waste disposal for a bit. So understanding how different microbes and minerals can pull that uranium out of potential future drinking water is super important. Is
that a pretty elusive thing? These radioactive things like uranium, do they kind of slip into everything and it's hard to get them out?
It depends. I mean, a lot of different heavy metals and stuff can end up slipping in. Depends the form, depends how they ended up slipping in the first place and where they slipped from. So some of the stuff that I was working with was nuclear waste disposal. So eventually a lot of different countries around the world are going to take nuclear waste in a package and put it underground. And once they do put it underground, eventually that canister is going to corrode and it's going to come out.
Yeah.
And it will probably not be for at least 10,000 years. And I guess philosophically, who will we be as a species in 10,000 years? But if we're even going to be around for 1,000 years.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. By my research, I don't know. It just doesn't look good.
But it is interesting to see, once it does come out of those canisters, how will it react with the environment around it? Will bacteria help or hinder the process of keeping our environment safe?
Yeah, sometimes I'm very frightened by what I hear, these ideas that they come up with, like, okay, so we'll take all this nuclear waste, right? We'll put it in a rocket ship and we'll send it off into outer space. It's like, what if it blows up like the Challenger?
Exactly. That's exactly the example I use every single time someone tells me to jettison it into a sun. I'm like, we've made enough mistakes as people that that's never going to happen. We're never going to have an explosion where we have nuclear waste in our atmosphere. No, thank you.
Oh my God.
But deep underground, I'd rather it be than sitting at the surface waiting for it to leak out.
Right. And if this whole fusion thing pays off, hopefully there's no waste. That's the idea.
Yeah. Knock on wood.
We'll see. Again, will we be here? Let's just wait and see.
Yeah, they say it's 20 years off, but it's always been 20 years off for the last 60 years.
Shout out to my guy, Guy McPherson, this doctor. He's the doomsday doctor. He says that 2026 will be the time that humanity goes away, and that's pretty soon here.
So I should take some more vacation time now.
Yeah, don't get too wrapped up in the future. No. But you got to travel all over the place for your work. You've got to go to different places that have different regulations and different ideas. What did you notice about the different places and the contaminants they have and the regulations?
Different countries have different regulations, and that's dependent upon the safety case and the best case scenarios for those different countries. So if you're looking at something like cadmium, if you go to Germany, for example, you're allowed to have about 1 milligram per kilogram present in your soil. But if you go to the UK, it could be up to 10. In Canada, it's about 3 milligrams per kilogram. So those regulations are set in stone, and you have to remediate or contain that spill if you have high concentrations. But if you are somewhere like Canada, they're very strong recommendations, but they're not ingrained where you need to remediate.
Interesting.
So it is interesting how different laws are built around the protection of our soils and waters. And then people say that soil is a material that regenerates itself, but really not in our lifetimes. You can think of soil as a non-regenerating resource, because once we get rid of all of our clean soil and contaminate it all, it won't be in our lifetime that it renews itself.
So are there other areas other than, the nuclear waste can get into everything, but do you know things about like agricultural runoff? Is that other things that we could be looking at using microbiology to cure?
For sure. Well, for example, cadmium tends to be in this runoff a lot because it tends to be associated with mined phosphorus. So we put phosphate onto a field for agriculture for growing plants, and you end up with cadmium in your fields for that. So finding things that can absorb and prevent, flow downstream, ending up in rivers and lakes are crucial. Having it, stay in one place. Chromium, like for example, if you're looking at bacteria to remove chromium from solution, bacteria are have superpowers when it comes to removing chromium from solution, because they can change the oxidation state of an area. So what that means is chromium 6, or we all know as hexavalent chromium for those who watched Aaron Brockovich back in the day. Maybe I'm dating myself a bit here, but
I know.
Yeah. She, was looking at hexavalent chromium, 6 plus chromium. You can actually remove oxygens and have a reducing environment and create chromium 3 instead of chromium 6. And that actually will precipitate out and not stay in the water.
What are they using this stuff for?
They end up just in slags or coming off in industrial processes. For example, cadmium pops off in welding materials, and it is in a lot of materials that we use. For example, if you're mining zinc, there's a lot of cadmium associated with zinc sulfides.
So more of a byproduct of industry.
Exactly.
Oh, God, that's a shame. So when we're talking about these unsung little heroes, microbes, which ones do we know that are the hungriest and are the best?
Well, there's a whole slew of them, and it depends what you're doing. But what's really interesting is some of the research out there talks about how, depending on what you're looking at, it might not matter which one specifically that you need to invest in, so to speak. A lot of places that are looking at, a lot of people that are looking at microbial sorption, for example, removing those materials using bacteria as just a sorbent, will have found that many different types of bacteria remove metals, for example, in a similar way. So it doesn't matter if you have a gram-positive cell, which means it has I won't go too much into the chemistry of the cell surface, but 2 different types of bacteria, for example, Bacillus subtilis or Pseudomonas petita, they're different gram-positive or gram-negative bacteria, so they have different chemistry of the cell walls, but they're still able to absorb a similar amount of metals as a function of pH. So at lower pH and higher pH, they can remove about the same amount of metal from solution.
Interesting.
So it could be one of those things where we just, start adding food for those bacteria to an area, grow more of the bacteria, and then if you have a contaminant plume going through that area, they'll be able to absorb in almost like a bacterial net some of that contaminant.
And so they're either eating it or absorbing it, or is there a byproduct? Do they poop out something specific, or?
So there's a couple different types of ways that bacteria can remove a contaminant. So when it comes to like a metal, metals don't really change all that much when it comes to, they can either be in solution or they can precipitate out, and they can have a lot of different forms that they're present in, but often metals are not going to evaporate. You don't get metals evaporating into the atmosphere. You can get them aerosolizing into particles that end up as dust in the atmosphere, but they don't become a gas. So they're a little bit easier to deal with, but they're also damaging to the environment. So one thing that they can do when it comes to bioremediation is your bacteria can adhere that metal to the surface, and then if you scoop out that bacteria and remove it, you've removed the metal. But it can also, and then it's just a surface reaction. It's not turning it into anything. It's not pooping it out or eating it. But another thing they can do is they can metabolize the material, or they can bring it into the system. For example, I looked at some of the work that I've done in the past was looking at uranium, and the bacteria themselves, under the conditions that I looked at, were able to bring the uranium into the body of the cell, and it used the phosphate that was inside the cell as a nucleation point, and it precipitated these minerals that were uranium phosphate minerals. So they were no longer, liquid uranium in the solution. It was uranium minerals inside the bacterial cell. And I remember this because it was now I'm a Trekkie. So what I saw when I looked at this picture was a perfect Star Trek badge on this bacteria.
Cool.
And so I always called them the red coat.
That is so cool. You're usually like excited about stuff like that, right? When you see that. Yeah.
Exactly. So that little bacteria sacrificed himself and, helped clean up the water.
That's so cool. So do you think you're confident that we might come to a point where we can cultivate these bacteria and then just kind of set them loose on an issue?
Or they just might be bacteria that are already present. Bacteria are everywhere. There's bacteria crawling all over ourselves right now.
Ooh.
There's bacteria. They're good for you, though. It's fine. You don't want to remove them.
Okay. If you tell me that.
You're safe. But there's already tons of bacteria in the soil. And one way that that plants can get nitrogen to be able to grow is with bacteria that live at the cell roots, or at the plant roots, sorry. And so there's already tons of bacteria in the environment. And so using what's already there and just adding nutrients to the ground would be a way to help them grow, because they tend to live in this like stasis until they get enough food thrown into the system, and then bam, they kind of explode.
I know, but with like E. coli in the stomach, and if when you go to Mexico, you find out that you had them before, you just kind of tip the scales a little bit too hard, and now you
fed them.
Now you're firing out both ends.
That has not happened to me, so I will make sure to avoid the ice.
Yeah, careful. Don't spring for the tap water. Rookie mistake. Yeah, so, well, that's good to know, and hopefully that's what the kids are calling the symbiotic biodiversity, stuff like that, where you're just actually encouraging something that's already there to do its job, and it be,
Exactly.
You prefer that method rather than humankind has been for centuries trying to manipulate science very harshly and force nature to do it. You find that it's better to just ease it in there, let everybody just kind of help each other?
If you can do it that way, then yes. One, it's more environmentally friendly, and two, it is cheaper. So everyone likes that kind of method. But you can't always clean things up as efficiently that way. So it depends. You have to do some trials and tests, and if it doesn't work, then you might have to scoop everything out and remediate it and then put everything back in again.
I have this question here. I don't know if you can answer. What are some of the most exciting discoveries in that field of microbiological remediation? Either research you've done or somebody else has done, something that's really incredible.
I think I touched on it a bit when I talked about like chromium.
That's the one.
How bacteria can change the entire oxidation state of an area. Basically, it can completely change how much oxygen is present and accessible to minerals. So we talk about how, humans, we can't affect things all that much, but these tiny little microorganisms can completely affect how much oxygen is in a system. I think that's
pretty fascinating.
Super cool. Yeah. And so if they're completely changing the oxygen concentration of the system, and then that affects the mineralogy, and it affects whether or not we have, this toxic material that is free flowing in our water versus a toxic material that has been precipitated out and then dropped out of the system. So it's no longer contaminating our water. Those bugs are pretty awesome. They also do that with uranium. So uranium 6+ can be reduced down to uranium 4+ by bacteria, and 6 will be in your water and 4 will drop out and precipitate. So whereas you had a water flowing through rock, for example, like an aquifer that you would normally pump water out to drink, like a well, for example, if you have a well that's contaminated with uranium 6, then you add some food for the bacteria and they can produce this. Yeah. They can start reducing the uranium 6 down to uranium 4, and Bob's your uncle, you have less contamination.
So I ain't no scientician, but what's wrong with a little uranium in the water?
Well, I mean, it depends if you want to start glowing, but
Oh, is that true? Could I? Well, it might be handy. Depend if I lived in the north. If I go to Scandinavia, that's pretty handy. Yeah. No, but it's cancerous, and you can sprout tumors like pretty much.
I mean, uranium is an alpha, emits alpha radiation, so it's something that it's not too dangerous at lower concentrations if you're just next to it, but it's very dangerous if you consume it Polonium is another example. It's an alpha emitter that you don't want to consume. There was a story, kind of going off on a random tangent, but there was I don't know if you've heard about Alexander Livichenko. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was a Russian ex-Russian who was living in London and was murdered with polonium because he was given polonium to drink in his tea. And he was the man that solved his own murder because he was slowly dying of alpha radiation because he'd consumed it.
Oh my God. Great way to go.
You could trace it all over London looking at where the radiation was and use a Geiger counter and find where people had walked with.
That's like a whodunit. It's like, well, just follow the bloody footprints back to the person. They probably still didn't find it. KGB.
Yeah.
Probably. Scary stuff. Well, yeah, everybody out there, don't read your food labeling, make sure there's no uranium in it. And what if you took a Geiger counter to a supermarket? Do you think you'd find something on traces of various kinds of fruits and vegetables and stuff?
So you can detect radiation at a very, very low concentration, at concentrations often that aren't even harmful if you consume them. The banana that you eat puts off radiation. The potassium is radioactive in bananas. So
no more bananas.
But it's totally fine. For example, we have something called background radiation. So the rocks around us emit radiation. And so, for example, living in Edmonton, we have higher radiation coming out of the ground than if I lived in Vancouver. Different countries and different areas emit different amounts of radiation depending on what kind of rocks they're built on.
Now I have a radiator in my room. Is that going to give me radiation?
In the form of heat, okay. Radiative heat, yeah.
But that's the good kind, right?
That's a good one, yeah.
Okay, good.
As long as it's working.
Because I like to put my feet on it, so.
As long as you don't turn it up too high. Okay,
all right. Writing it down. Don't turn up heat too high. Yeah. So in the future, what are you going to do as far as exciting new projects you're going to work on? Are you going to... do you have colleagues that work on mushroom remediation? Because that's like popular right now with you taking mushrooms and feeding them oil or something like this.
Yeah, so I've not done what you would think of as mushrooms, but some of the work that I've done has been looking at different fungi and how they can fix phosphate. Understanding different ways to get phosphorus to be able to feed our plants in the future is something that I'm really interested in. So another area that I've been studying is using wastewater treatment plant biosolids. So basically everything that we eat gets flushed to the wastewater treatment plant, and then the solids, biosolids, can get used as fertilizer once we, clean them up a little bit. But that fertilizer will also have cadmium in it, and it will have other things like pharmaceuticals. All the pharmaceuticals that we take into our bodies there. So I'm looking at pharmaceuticals and how they can move around in the environment.
Okay, I'll bite. What's the current consensus of the pharmaceuticals in our toilet water, and how much of it is making it back around to the faucet where we drink out of, and what kinds?
Making it back to the phosphate. Bleh. I'm mixing up phosphate and phosphate at the moment.
If you have a phosphate faucet.
Exactly. Hopefully not too much phosphate in your faucet, but not much makes it back to your faucet. If you're living somewhere where there's a treatment center that's treating your water. But what we want to do is have all of that on our crops, and we don't want it all washing into rivers and changing the personality of fish. They've seen like fish at very low concentrations of antipsychotics in the water can drastically change their minnow personalities. So minnows all of a sudden are braver and get eaten, and you don't have them growing up into larger fish.
Isn't this where this crazy guy got this idea that the frogs were turning gay, and he went on a big rant about it? You remember this?
I don't remember that one.
And I think it's Alex Jones, and he's the screaming nutcase.
Yeah, I know who he is.
But he actually said that a long time ago. He said, so he takes small little things like that and blows them up into proportion. Yeah,
they say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing because you don't actually understand any of it.
People are only reading headlines now and past, I can't read a whole article. I'll just read the headlines and then I'll walk around saying, hey, did you hear? Farts can cure cancer. That was the thing for a while. They said, oh, farts will cure cancer. And turns out if you read the whole thing, it's not at all what the scientists came up with. But it sells. And on we go. So do you ever have are at odds with science versus like the age we live in where people are absolutely going insane? And how do you stay calm in those?
It is frustrating when you see all these fantastical articles and you go and click on them, and sometimes it's really hard to actually find the scientific article it's based on. And then you read the scientific article and it's very, very, very thinly related to what the fantastical article actually said. So sometimes it's a fun exercise to give to students is, find where the original data came from, whether or not it's good data on top of everything, because something can be published without it being great.
And also, do you find because you've been going to school for years, you're working in academia, you're in the club. Do you find there to be a little bit too much conflict of interest with corporate influence in science?
In academia, I haven't noticed it because, most of us have government funding. Sometimes you have industry funding, but that industry funding, you have to declare it. You can't just, say, hey, I'm going to study cadmium coming off of this, pipe here that I am definitely not being paid to
to not figure anything out.
The pipe to study. You have to tell everyone who is reading your work that you're being paid by this company to examine this, and whether it's for good or whether it's for tax write-offs, these companies actually seem to care about what is being put out there now. So good. That's at least more helpful.
There's a safety net. Yeah. They do. Yeah. They too tend to like to do their science that supports a product or service that they happen to be selling. But I'm always on the lookout, and especially nutrition is a big deal. I've talked to lots of people about nutrition and stuff, and we don't do so well at that department as far as talking about waste in the world or pollution. The pollution of the body is the American diet for sure, but it all gets turned into biosolids, huh?
Yeah, and that goes right back to making. Well, I guess it's not making. They'll make vegetables, maybe not.
I hope so.
McDonald's.
all my hippie friends are doing their own compost toilets, and with enough time and enough for the right diet, it's fine. But you know. We need to
measure how much is popping back off in those vegetables.
Yeah, no doubt. I'd say I'll pass on the homegrown beets. We'll see. We'll see about that.
Well, if it's lettuce takes up a lot of materials that get put onto it. So maybe phytoremediation. So it's just when you have plants that take up materials and you cut the leaves and they have the heavy metals and whatnot in them. But
lead's a big deal too. Lead can actually get into vegetables, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, lead is a big deal, but luckily we're not painting houses and driving around with leaded
those were the days. Those were the days. They just look at stuff. What's wrong with it? Well, put some lead on it. I don't know. It was the cure that fixes everything. Makes it shinier. I don't know. Just do it. Yeah. We'll worry about the consequences later.
It also killed bacteria so that the wood didn't rot quite as quickly.
So it worked to some degree.
Yeah. But then it also killed other things than just bacteria.
But we figured out a different way since then, like to seal wood. Okay. Which is probably also chemical.
Plastics and stuff. And
latex paint that seals in the moisture or what have you.
Yeah.
Oil-based paints. Yeah. It's a slow process, but I always say if you're going to invent something and issue it into society, let's take a good hard look at it first. Whoa.
For sure.
Don't just
instead of after the fact.
Right. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. That's kind of how humanity works with technology. I give it a weary eye. I go, I don't know about all this artificial intelligence and stuff. Seems weird. Yeah, it's handy now. Just wait. Yeah.
Hey, it could have written an entire script for us.
Yeah, this could have completely replaced us and made us obsolete. That just happened. I'm an artist. I do all these kind of artsy stuff. Computers just took our jobs. This year, there's a bunch of artists up in arms on the internet saying, no, the robots took, because the stuff looks great. It looks really fantastic. And
luckily, I think there was a court that said that it can't be copyrighted unless it's made by a human. So that's good.
Well, that's good if we can prove the difference. It's like those deep fakes, It's like, if it's good enough, will people know the difference? Be like, that was probably him. People won't know. Was that really him? Was it not him?
Touche.
Fake news, as they say, as the kids say. All right. Well, I want to ask you one last question. So, what do you do to relax when you see, you see all this stuff in the world, make you angry, shake your fists, say, the hell's wrong with people? What do you do to relax? You play chess?
I like getting back into nature when it's not, minus 40 degrees outside. My husband and I built out this minivan into a mini camper that we took out to the mountains quite a few times to go camping, and we've got a little adventure cat that we bring with us that likes going on hikes. So when you hike with a cat, you make friends everywhere you go.
Oh, I would be your friend. If I saw you with a cat, I'd be your friend. I always look at the people. I don't even look at the people. I just look at the cat. Hello, how are you?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not talking to you guys. I'm talking to your cat.
Fair weather friends, then, I guess.
Yeah. No, animals are great. And going for a walk, that sounds like the right recipe for me.
Yeah.
But
clear your head and remember what you're doing this for. Yeah.
Van life is very appealing to me, too. I spent many years traveling in the van.
Awesome.
Across America. So,
be a bigger van than a minivan.
So. Sometimes. One time it was a Volvo. One time it was a full size, And in the Volvo, you could pull down the back seats and just stick your legs in the trunk and sleep. That's all right.
Oh, that's something. Yeah.
A little crooked. But I made the mistake of trading the van for the Volvo because I thought, better gas mileage. But then I thought, wait a minute, we're going to take a trip across America. We need. Too late. But yeah, good times. Getting out to nature. You ever been to Joshua Tree? That's a beautiful place.
That I've never been to yet. That would be awesome.
You should go there. One day you go to California, go down there. But I recommend all of it. It's all really nice to see. As long as you can get away from the people. Oh, God. Yeah.
I've been to San Francisco and went to see the redwoods there. That was gorgeous.
Ooh, I love that. I lived up there. For a while. San Francisco and north of San Francisco, you have to go not too far, but then you start seeing these big red trees, and aren't they bigger? They're bigger than you expect, right?
They're so much bigger than you imagine. Like, you see pictures, and then you get there, and it just feels awe-inspiring.
Yeah. I would always kind of break my neck trying to get to the top of the tree. Yeah, that's absolutely something to see. I hope that other people really start getting turned on to nature, because I loved it like you. I was, from a kid, I just thought there's something special here, and the cities and everything just seems so fake and dirty. Yeah. Well, let's hope for the best. I'll check in with you. We'll do this again. We'll check your progress, making sure we're making some progress in the world. And
keep me honest, yeah.
It's up to you. You got to do all the work, okay? We're counting on you. Sheesh.
Will do.
All right. Dr. Janice Kenney, wonderful human being. All right. That's your real title.
That, I promise, it's real.
All right. Anything you want to add before you go?
No, it was just really great chatting with you. It's been a really fun conversation.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. Wave goodbye to everybody. Bye. Thanks for coming to the show.
Bye.
Cheers.